That at 7 o'clock, I'll call the meeting to order of our committee as a whole for October 8th, 2019. I would like a motion that the agenda for the October 18th, 2019 committee of the whole meeting be adopted as presented. Councillor Chenard? Any additions or deletions? There can't be now, so I hope you're all in favor. All in favor? Okay, adoption of the minutes. I would like a motion that the minutes of the September 12th, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted as presented. All right, Councillor Bevan?
I think it should be September 10th, was it?
Oh.
You said 12th?
Oh, did I? Okay, I'm sorry, September 10th. Okay. Were there any errors or omissions? Okay, all in favor? Passed. All right, delegations. We have two gentlemen here. For Keepers of the Athabasca, I'd like to invite you to come to the table and do your presentation.
My name is Paul Delange, co-chair of Keepers of the Athabasca, and I don't live too far away, just up the North Road, about 20 kilometers. Bought a piece of land there and way back in 1991, and moved there finally over 10 years ago. I have a design and build business focusing on solar straw bale buildings, and a great interest in water conservation and the Athabasca River watershed. And so I've been active with this group for several years. I'd like to introduce Joseph Large as well, from Saddle Lake area, St. Paul Saddle Lake area.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but possibly we should all introduce ourselves then to all of you. So go ahead, Crystal, please.
Councillor Byer.
Troy Sorensen.
Mayor Kevin Zahara.
Janet Wilkinson.
Councillor Jean Chenard.
Jackie Curry.
Trevor Bevan.
Go ahead. Just to wonder who's at the table.
Oh.
We'll all introduce ourselves.
Kayla Sidor.
Bertio Brady.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, just so you know who you're speaking to.
So just to give you a quick introduction to this group, I'll pass some pamphlets around. Should be enough. And I'm just going to read very quickly just one sentence here. Just describes us so well. We worked so hard on this sentence for this motion. We are First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and environmental groups, including watershed citizens, working together for the protection of water, land, and air, and thus for all living things today and tomorrow in the Athabasca River watershed. So our concerns range from the issue of land use and traditional land use, protection of water quality for all purposes, and whether it's municipal or farm use, and also for the purposes of the fish and the animals that frequent the watershed. And our group is probably almost 2/3 Métis Indigenous, I would say, and various concerns and various interests in our group. So it's pretty lively, and we received funding about a year and a half ago to create a series of programs, workshops for schools and for adults related to education on several themes connected to our mission. And so this is what we're talking about tonight. And I'd like to, Joseph is more involved than I am with these workshops and presenting more of them. I do present, I'm trained to present some of them in this area. Joseph's been traveling throughout the watershed, all the way to Newbury and other destinations like Cold Lake. So I'll pass it to you, Joseph.
Thank you, Paul. As you know, my name is, as Paul said, my name is Joseph Large. I'm from the Treaty 6 territory, Saddle Lake Band of Plains Cree people. It may kind of seem strange because this is mainly for Treaty 8 area. And I know Edson is just a little bit outside Treaty 8. But that being said, we were supposed to go to Hinton, but Hinton didn't respond in time for us to access their Friendship Center. And Paul was able to get a hold of Edson's Friendship Center and to present our workshops. Now, like Paul said, for the past year, I've been doing workshops in all the schools from Fort McMurray, high level area, and Grand Cache and Hinton. And I've done about 70 roughly workshops in all the schools as far east as Coal Lake, Fishing Lake. Now these are all Treaty 8 areas, and that's where we're mainly covering, because that's where the group is from. And that time the funding was under the old NDP government,
How soon they're forgotten.
The funding was on energy efficiency and climate action. And that's what we've been focusing on for the past year. This year, we're focusing on anti-racism grant that we received for institutions and in several areas. Edson, like I said, came on board kind of last minute, and we were able to do, I think it was Grand Prairie that didn't charge us anything to use their Friendship Center. So we're able to pick up an extra Friendship Center to spread the word kind of thing. And our workshop series is called Flowing into the Right Relationship Workshops. And it's a series of workshops that have been developed over several years by prior to my arrival. And I did 3 of them, climate action workshop, and maybe pass these around so you can read. And that's what our goal is right now, is to educate the general public, mainly institutional people like those in the hospitals and social services and education like that. And our first workshop was supposed to have started in September, and it was supposed to have been climate action, but we kind of pushed everything aside because of the late contact with Edson. So this coming month in November, we're presenting 2 workshops. November 7th is Kairos blanket exercise. And during my initial contacts a few weeks ago with the town institutions, a lot of your institutional people didn't know what I was talking about when I was talking about the blanket exercise. So I would very much like or appreciate if the people, the institutional people participate in this workshop that we're going to be presenting. I'll be presenting along with Paul, and I'll be bringing one of my fellow facilitators from Lac La Biche to come with me to help out. Like I said earlier, this is an anti-racism workshop. That'll be the main focus on the first 4 workshops, and to bring people up to speed on what's really happening out there between Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people. Plus to tell a history from Indigenous viewpoint, especially exploring the treaties. We all know what the history book says about that, but we have our own version.
I bet.
Yeah.
Two sides to
Anyway,
everything.
there's several that you'll see on that pamphlet, that poster that that went around. And our last workshop is called "Where's My Power in Climate Action," and those are on climate issues. Those workshops aren't. We're not attacking energy users like the oil and gas and the dams and the lumber companies. We're just saying we can do things better. We have to be aware of what's happening out there. And I know we have the technology, we have the knowledge to do things better, and I know we have the money to do things better. Like oil and gas say we don't have the money, but I know they do. The big question is, where's it really going? That's what you got to ask yourself. It's not going to us, I know that. Anyway, that's what we're here for. Is
invitation to the first workshop, November 7th, blanket exercise, and I'd like to just explain quickly what it is. It has been on the news here and there, the stories about the blanket exercise. What it was developed quite a few years ago.
1999.
In 1999?
Yeah.
by the Kairos group out of Ontario.
No, that was set up by the TRC Commission. After the first few years, the government decided well, TRC recommended we need to do something to tell a different story of Canada. And they use blankets.
Right, it's a reenactment of the history, of what we know, the facts we know, nothing made up, just the facts in terms of the first settlers and then what happened before Confederation and then what happened after Confederation, including a little clip on residential schools, and it's also a participatory exercise. So it's quite dramatic. A lot of people find it very, very, very powerful because everybody participates in a reenactment in a space, and people tend to pretty well remember everything. That it's our most dramatic workshop of all, for sure.
Yeah, we've had those presented at our high school where they invited all the members of the community. Councillor Chenard actually was one of the people reading the script for
I
it,
was the actual
and I was at it.
evil European. I
Right.
had no idea what I was getting into. I had the way people hate me in one room at one time. But it was very enlightening.
It was very, very.
Okay, so anybody else have heard or know about it? You know
Uh-huh.
about it as well?
A few
You
times.
participate?
Yeah,
you
right.
participate. Okay,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
almost, well, more than half of you then.
Yeah.
Participate or know about it. Okay, great. I think it's a wonderful way to educate so many people that just don't know our history. And for me, it's important when I look at my own history. In my family, we have 200 years of history fur trading with natives. Plus, I have some Métis background. My mother was 100% Métis culture, French Métis. Father was French. Yeah, Grouard. So I was raised in sort of a French Métis environment and had some early insights, but nothing like this gentleman saw. So I understand enough to appreciate the need for more to understand all that, for sure.
And with that being said, I believe Kaylee?
Kayla.
Kayla
Yeah.
showed you a copy of an example of a letter that the town can send out.
Yeah, on the back of our thing.
And,
We did have it, yes, thank you, Kayla. Mhm.
And I appreciated that would happen. And she's got my email address, and if any issues come up, she knows how to get a hold of me.
Okay, good.
And I know it said on the poster that there's 2 times scheduled for this exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And in our experience with the presenters, it's too hard on them to do it twice in one day.
Okay.
So we've moved it up to only during the day, 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock time frame for the blanket
Okay.
exercise. Because my experience with that was in Hinton, when I did 2 in one day, I was emotionally and physically and mentally wiped out by the end of the day. And I said, never again, I'm doing this twice in one day. It takes too much out of a person, especially with little kids, and they ask a lot of
Lot of questions.
questions you have to answer, and and sometimes
Surprising
tough questions, tough questions.
If you're finished, then do any councillors have any questions for, go ahead, Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to Mr. Long, thank you for your presentation. I have not done the Kairos blanket exercise, so I'd definitely be interested in that. Is there an age limit on the
No, there
exercise?
I know it says for adults institutional, but we're open to whoever can come. We're not closing the doors on anyone.
Okay.
So whoever can make it, great. If they can't, well, that's okay too. It's a personal choice. We're not forcing anybody.
Yeah.
You gotta do this kind of thing. But we do recommend it.
Any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Did you have to bring your talking stick?
My what?
Isn't it a talking stick when people want to talk, you had to pass the stick? That was
No, I didn't bring it. I left it at home.
No, I was gonna say, when I did the blanket one, there was
Uh-huh.
part of it, they had like a talking stick.
At the
Oh,
end,
So
at the end.
and it was passed to each individual.
And the way I did it is I left it open, and
Right.
I recognized each speaker.
Mhm.
And, I go like this, and I really voice strongly that to respect,
Yeah.
each speaker, each person. And the little kids really followed that, and I know adults are better than kids.
The
Sometimes.
other actually question is November 7th, where and when?
Friendship Center, 1 to 3 o'clock.
1 till
That was the
3.
part I need clarification.
I'll be emailing Kayla.
Kayla,
Yeah.
yeah.
Kayla, to let her know, and I'll be emailing the other institutions a week prior to remind them.
Okay. Any other questions from council? Yes, Councillor
That
Curry?
was one just November 7th, you said?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then, because I was gonna ask about the students, but it's during the day, so you're
Yeah.
not doing an evening one?
For the blanket exercise, no.
Okay, okay, perfect.
But the other workshops will be doing two a day.
Okay, perfect. Understand. I've done it, and it is extremely emotional. And I think, just to make note that our MLA was here yesterday, or last week, and he made a comment in participating. No, that was in the
That was
dance.
Grand Crash.
The dance.
Dance, sorry. I was thinking it was blanket exercise. But definitely, I think we should make sure an invite is sent to him, because I know he did a round dance and really appreciated it. So I think it'd be a great one to send an invite
Thank
to.
you for the awesome.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Through our public school division, you know, we have public and Catholic, they're both
Yeah.
public, but
Yeah.
they used to be Grand Yellow Public School Division. They have like a First Nations Métis Inuit program, and
Yeah.
Renee Wolfing is coordinator of it all.
Yeah.
And so she does a lot of work with the students, but I'm sure she'd like to get in touch with you for sure.
I have to ask our project manager, like, if we can do Edson in our school.
Oh, I see,
contacts.
okay.
Because like I
Mhm.
said, you're just outside. the
Just
tree-
outside,
tree
okay.
area.
We wandered out.
You're just outside Athabasca River Basin too, so
Right.
you're like this area
Actually, no,
more.
this is actually, as far as like the Cloud River does go to Whiteport, so it is in the watershed.
I think I can talk her into.
Okay,
allowing me
good.
to- Like, I'm the main contact for that too, for our school presentation,
Oh, well, that would be great.
so, yeah.
All right,
I know
and,
with Hinton, it was our native liaison that we did this year. My wife's contact with her, and
oh,
we
okay.
did 10 workshops in Hinton this
Mhm.
past year.
Well, I think Renee would, if she knew about this, maybe she can direct people to the workshops, which would be good.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
I
and I'm
think-
pleased with your mandate. I think water is gold, so
Yeah.
I'm pleased that you do something about that. Really appreciate it. If there's no other questions, we'll just thank you very much for your presentation. And you're welcome to stay if you want for the rest of the meeting, or we do understand if you want to
Gonna
leave.
sneak out like hell.
Either way, it's up to you. But thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it.
I sure appreciate us, for my part anyway, and I know Paul is the same in that we're here to present to you, and I'm very grateful for that.
Well,
Thank you very much.
so are we. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll have department reports. The first that I see is infrastructure and planning. That would be you about the economic development advocate. Yes, Martina? Okay, thank you.
Madam Chairman, members of council, our planning manager does send her regards. She could not be here today. However, she did prepare a report for us which details a letter that we feel would probably kick off the conversation with regards to a regional economic development agency or something different, just some type of economic advocate for partners that we select that choose to participate. With that, for staff, we've reached out and
Thank you.
I've attended 2 regional meetings with other regional staff members with different communities to garner kind of input and support in what they feel would add some value. That's been funneled into this letter in the sense of something that we would like to have council review, see what they feel has value and they can get behind. And then essentially this would be a letter that we'd ask in the next council meeting to have approval for the mayor to send out to your fellow counterparts and see who wants to join us in exploring this type of thing. With regards to what it would try to detail, we would be looking at something that have a platform that it would have a little bit of resiliency. So setting out some general terms in the sense of looking at something that might be for a 3-year term. So it's got a solid chance to exist and see whether it had benefit or not, or whether the partners felt it had value. And then it also takes a lot to set it up. Some of the conversations that came from a lot of the partners who are not other governments but who are actually other NGOs said that it should probably be a kind of at arm's length versus type of agency. So whether that's kind of like a regional municipal agency or whether that is a NGO, they felt it would be better than to have a board versus than having one municipality that leads the entire thing. So this is our first draft for you guys to consider and give us direction on what you feel is the best route to go. But not doing a letter kind of puts staff in a position where we don't have a reason to act without a motion.
Okay, Councillor Chenard, I saw your hand first, and then I have you.
I like where we're going with the concept. Do we have any idea cost-wise, what this would cost us? Like, I mean, I totally agree with the involvement, but what would it cost me? What would it detail?
Well, Madam Chairman, to Councillor Chouinard, that would be the biggest question we'd first have is once we know which partners are there, that kind of directs what types of people who will be at the table. And once they're at the table, one of the first things to do would be to set a terms of reference as to whether this was something that would be hiring staff to go and find new business, whether this would be someone that supported business, even though they might be paid for by the public sector, they would be working to see business be successful and argue with their planning departments, whatever their role would be determined by that terms of reference. So.
Mayor Zahara.
So this ties into the conversations that I've been having with regional mayors in the latest meeting we had in Drayton Valley that CEO Derek and I attended. I think that our regional partners have been waiting for us to send a letter because we've committed to kind of starting the process of formalizing something that we've been discussing for over a year now. There are some components in this letter that are missing. About setting up an economic region for our area because our regional municipalities, none of us are in an economic region, and we're one of the only places in the province of Alberta without an economic region. There's already been a discussion between the Mayor of Whitecourt and the Minister of Tourism and Trade. I'm just trying to make sure I get that right. About looking at funding opportunities, grant programs, that sort of thing to kind of help us start an economic region. I think we need staff resources behind it, and I think there needs to be a financial commitment from all municipalities participating in order to make this successful, and that's why I think a 3-year term is important. But we do need to include that this will be about an economic region as well. And we are missing a number of the partners. I see here you have the CCs. The discussion so far on my end has been with Edson, Hinton, Drayton, Rocky, and Whitecourt. So those are the municipalities that are very gung-ho and keen on moving forward on this. And talking with the mayors of the other communities, they really would like to see us working together regionally on an initiative such as this.
Councillor Sorensen.
Yeah, he just put up my hand before he finished. But yeah, I was just concerned about the communities that were being CC'd. It didn't seem like the region was wide enough, and I completely agree that there's a lot of money available, or at least provincial support available, if we form a regional economic development agreement or agency. So that's important. It's not just hiring one staff to do it, or it is important to get regional collaboration and fill that role.
Councillor Bayer.
Through the chair, thank you. So I'm very happy to see this on the table and getting some action. This is something that I know myself and a few other councillors brought up from our last AUMA, and I think that proceeding in this direction is beneficial. Every time we see a grant, it talks about collaboration and you know, what that looks like may be different for everybody, but like the mayor has said, I think our region is unique, and working together towards those goals. Regional economic development is always, I think, important for every area, and our regions have been hit in the past couple of years with the oil and gas industry and forestry in other years, and I think that if there's any way that we can work together, then I think that this is the right thing to do.
Anybody else? Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Swenson.
We had discussed this before, and one of the concerns that was raised was that if you just leave it open-ended, it could go in 100 different directions. And when we discussed it before, I thought we kind of more or less agreed that if we did do a regional economic development group, we'd focus them in a specific direction, such as a regional airport or some other key item, rather than just letting them work on economic development in general. So I'd be in favor of focusing this group, and maybe it's 2 or 3 different items to focus them on during their 3-year term. But I don't know how we could phrase that in the letter. Thanks.
Go ahead.
Madam Chairman, through to Councillor Sorensen. We could probably highlight the terms of reference, or having terms of reference, a committee struck with the terms of reference, and then stating that we want to have 3 targeted goals for those 3 years, whether that be, you could pick a facility like the airport, but I would probably say that the group would be able to look at a variety of different things, whether they say we want to look at an industry like tourism, something that they want to target to see growth in, it could be a lot of different things. But if you set a number, and you set a goal, then at least you know you're focused.
Right.
But we don't go into that too deeply here, and we could flesh that out if council wants us to in the letter for next week. Not necessarily the 3 terms, the 3 goals. I would say that should probably be the terms of reference.
Just by nodding the head then, would council like to see this reference down as to, it will be zoned in, funneled into some projects? Yes or no?
Do you have a comment about that first?
Yes?
I,
Okay.
I disagree.
Okay.
I disagree on that. I think that's too soon. I think right now that this letter is about, do we want to work as a region on something? And I think we could say, a narrow, but I think to say 3 is too soon. We haven't even agreed. We haven't even come to a consensus that we're going to do this. We need to then come to a consensus. And then I think from that, because we're also coming from it from the perspective very, very siloed of our community. And I think once we have our regions together, we might find, and it might need to be 5 things depending what the action plan looks like, right? That 5 things doesn't mean that they're not in the same area, that they don't flow together. So I just think we're too soon to narrow that. I think we're at the beginning steps of just, are we gonna do this and develop this? And then that person's role and stuff, I think, comes after. It's just my opinion.
Councillor Chenard?
Stole my words, I was totally agreeing. We're going too fast for great ideas. I have to echo what you're saying too. We first think, do we have cooperation, and then move forward. So I like the idea. So if we're understanding your thing is you're gonna send a letter out, how many parties are interested, correct? Then I'm in favor of sending a letter and let's get more information.
Councillor Sorensen?
So I am not in favor of just hiring a staff for ongoing long-term to just work on general economic development. So how can we word this letters to say that it's, and we don't have to put a number in there, but I do, my personal wish is that the letter states that it's an advocate for specific economic development goals or specific initiatives within that 3-year term.
To be developed as.
Yeah,
To be
absolutely. I'm not
developed.
gonna not
Mhm.
name it, yeah.
Are people in agreement with that? I think you're right, to hire someone just to look into it for 3 years. Who's interested in that? Not at all.
No, if it's worded that way, I'll agree with that.
You will?
'Cause I think
Okay.
it's right- I agree with Jack, it's right at
Mm-hmm.
the start here, so to name anything is, yeah.
Jean?
No, I'll let Jackie comment. No, my thing is, I would agree what I'm saying. We first need to see who's interested before we hire anyone or anything. Let's ask who's interested and then we'll get something over.
Yes. Councillor Curry?
It's a very nice point. I just feel like that.
There's a
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think it's really important that we don't tie our hands before we get the ball rolling here, because every community is focusing on different things already. It's how to tie those things together. So raising awareness of our region, what is available in our region. So if there is a company that is looking to do something with hemp, Well, guess what? Drayton Valley is the place where you're gonna be doing
Right.
that. If you're looking for somebody that's looking to service a broader area in the forestry sector, well, probably Whitecourt, Edson, or Hinton's gonna be one of those areas. We've also, the mayor's group has talked about, you know, some of the tourism initiatives. We all have bike parks we're developing, and all these sorts of things. So bringing awareness to some of these things, tying them in together, coming in with marketing plans. I think that's where this advocate or the staff member would be able to bring all that together to raise the profile. But I think we need to first get agreement between the municipalities that we are gonna look at forming an economic region with the intention of hiring somebody, form that terms of reference, and then, based on what the communities want, develop a terms of reference, including, you know, targeting economic diversification or whatever that may be, in order to make this group successful. I don't think we want to get too deep in the weeds straight off the get-go here. I think we need to let the group work those apps.
Any other input? Is that as clear as you need it to be?
Clear as mud.
I didn't say that. You can come back with a letter,
We have
can you?
some, I have some ideas for improvements, and again, if it's not what we're looking for,
can
then
always
we can
change
bring
it.
it back again.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, as long as we have what you need from it. All right, now we have the amendment to the snow and ice control policy. Who's going to speak to that?
Madam Chairman, I'd ask our transportation manager,
All right.
Sam
Thank you,
Shine,
Mr.
to come up.
Shine. Feel free to present.
Majority of the information is in the report, as are the maps that might be of
Right.
interest, but Sam will discuss the policy generally and is available for questions.
Yeah, so the previous policies there were, it was kind of made up or separated into 3 different policies. Each one was very minimal and lacking some critical information and some parameters for us to work within. In addition to that, we had some maps that were really part of operations that we needed to adjust, but because they were in policy, we couldn't adjust those maps. So we propose changing or making some alterations to the policy, making an amendment in which we highlight that critical information and remove the maps and put them into an operations standpoint where we're able to make adjustments.
Any questions then? Yes, Councillor Byer?
Through the chair, sorry, to Sam. So on the maps there, I looked through it, and on the residential zones, the acreages that are north and west of the water reservoir, they're gravel roads. Do we have a policy for that, or is that included, or how do they rate on the priority of snow removal?
Yeah, they're actually in terms of snow removal. We don't really do snow removal in that area because they have ditches there. When we don't need to pick up and remove snow, so we just push to the side. Gravel roads are dealt with in a different manner to tarmac roads. Because they have ditching and drainage, we're able to just push to one side and move on. So it's not a huge resource drain for us. I think we fit those in. Are they in our priorities 2s and 3s, or are they in the
3 and 4?
Couldn't see it.
3 and 4.
3 and 4? Yeah, they're in our priorities 3 and 4.
Oh, okay. Can I continue?
Yes, I think Martina wants to continue here too, so.
Madam Chairman, I was simply going to note that the areas that were being referred to are in priority area 3 and 4. That was all.
Okay, go ahead,
On
Councillor
page
Byer.
5
Okay.
of the report.
Did that include all of the roads?
3 and 4 generally incorporates the gravel roads that we have because they're all dealt with in a much more timely fashion due to the nature of the operation.
Oh, okay. I just thought some of the roads were missed, so I wasn't sure if that included all the roads or
That's
just a
just
portion of
plowing,
them. So,
not removal.
or sorry, plowing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Chenard?
So virtually these maps are just sort of formalizing, because looking at the maps is what common practice we've done over the years with just a few minor changes. So looking at example on Route 1 and 2, the solid red lines are the priority routes. So when the first snowfall hits, you hit the dark red and then we move on to the other ones. And then going to 3 and 4, I mean, I'm liking what I see in the map. That way if a taxpayer phones and said, how come that guy's cleaning roads, then at least we have something to refer back to, say, okay, these are priorities, and there's a reason why, because it's your main arteries then, correct?
Yeah, so the maps are primarily used for our operators to communicate to our operators where they should be working. The priority 1s and 2s are being done in simultaneously to 3s and 4s. It's
Yeah.
not like we progress from 2 to 3. It's actually being done at the same time.
Correct.
They require different pieces of equipment and different operators. So yeah, we just use them to better define and better communicate the procedures to our operators.
Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Saxon.
On policy number 5, I guess it would be. It is very clear here that so if the public pushes snow onto, I think if I'm reading that right, onto the road, it's a hazard to public safety enforced by local bylaw. But vice versa, if the town pushes snow onto private land or blocks a driveway, you know, the crews will strive not to do that. So it's very weak. The vice versa is very weak, in my opinion. So number 6 should be strengthened so that maybe there's a time frame that if town blocks a driveway or an entrance point or pushes snow onto private property, it will be dealt with within 12 hours or something. I don't know. It's just very weak, and I know it's one-sided. It reads one-sided.
But truly, I don't think the town does go back. Like, they're talking about just a little windrow that people have, and people shovel that themselves. Truly, they do.
Yeah, I think we've had some members of the public in the past that have cleared their entire property, or once a year they take their entire snow dump and push it out to the middle of the road.
And they need to be
that's what we
fined.
don't
They need
want.
to be fined.
If we're not aware of it happening, we're not able to clear it up. It turns to a massive ice obstacle in the middle of the road that could cause an incident with traffic. You know, if we end up pushing a slight windrow onto someone's driveway, it's not going to cause a safety issue. It's not convenient, and we don't want to do that, and we strive not to do it. And I don't think we have done it. I'm not aware of it anyway so far.
Yes, Martina.
Madam Chairman, through to Councillor Sorensen, the one item I'd note is if you establish a service level within a policy, and we don't have resources expanded to deal with that, it can be problematic. Not to mention, making it stronger without providing for a clear parameter is difficult. I have had to send crews to go and clean up grading work where there was a lip that was 3 inches that someone considered to be a drastic safety issue. If 3 inches of snow is pushed onto someone's driveway, I can guarantee that that will have an impact on our ability to provide service generally. So,
Yes.
Agreed. So I have no problem with the way number 5 is worded. I'm just saying that I've seen people blocked in their own driveway. They can't get out. They can't go anywhere until someone comes and clears that. Either they clear it or someone else has to come clear it. So I think number 6 should be strengthened. I don't know how. You may not want to put it. You may not want to quantify it, but it is the town's responsibility if they block in an entrance, in my opinion, that they go back and clear it.
Councillor Chenard.
I would have to disagree with that and agree with administration, because when you do that, if you put it in there, because there's been circumstances where people have been plowed in, but it's due not to the town's fault, where equipment's broke down, or they're clearing a certain area of town, and that's mainly due to breakdown, or they gotta go move to another area. So we have to put it in, but on the same token where we're telling people not to push their snow out, we're not really strongly wording it, but we need guidelines, but I agree guidelines, but there has to be somewhat of a gray area, because you're right, I've seen it myself where they plowed in and the person was in distress, there was a 2-foot snowbank and there was a whole panic, but at the end of the day, the grader broke down. So the grader had no intentions of plowing you in, he made a pass, and he just simply couldn't get back there right away. So we have to accommodate, but I like the idea of putting the rules, but leave some gray area. So for both sides, because if you're saying plowing snow, a person could get to extreme, we've all done it, you're going down your sidewalk and you got your snow on it, shovel on an angle, if it's too strong, that's literally plowing snow into town property. But I've seen it in extreme cases where you've mentioned the person's got a bobcat or something in there and they've cleaned out their entire yard and the street's just been cleaned and they shove it out in the street, no one's gonna notice. So we have to be careful, and I would agree, Gray, we have something, but don't get too strongly worded because it could work for or against us too strongly.
Yeah, and I think we've put in there that it'd be enforced by bylaw, meaning that bylaws, our bylaw officers would you know, prioritise or take the actions that are required. And as you said, it doesn't mean they're going to run around fining everybody. It might be that they just walk around and say, you know, would you mind trying not to do that
Correct.
in the future? Obviously, depending on severity and all that, you know, pushing a little bit of snow on the sidewalk, they're probably not even going to say anything. You know, it's just that they would go and it could go that way is kind of what it's saying.
Okay, Councillor Curry? Raise your hand.
Trevor.
Oh, Bevan, okay, and then you.
I have to say that I agree with Councillor Sorensen, that I do think that, and I think that it is covered with the comments that everybody has made in the very last comment. I do think number 6 should be worded more strongly. There have been on many occasions where windrows have been left overnight, not because of broken equipment, because of changing of shift, which have prevented people from being able to get to their houses, and they've had to park elsewhere and stuff. And I do think that the wording is, if we're being that strongly on what we're expecting of our public, that there needs to be some ownership on us, that we don't do the same thing. And I think the very final statement after number 12 there, where it says in the event of extraordinary weather conditions or equipment failures, these guidelines may become unachievable, covers that, what you had suggested. If we had an issue, then there's that reason for that. But I do think that, I agree with Councillor Sorensen, I think that it doesn't read fairly or equitable in our expectations of the public versus our expectation of our organization. So I don't know if it's just a matter of timelines, a little bit of changing on the wording of that.
If we apply timelines, like if you say, are you going to get to it in 24 hours, it might mean that we have to drop all priority routes, all ambulance runs and whatnot, emergency routes to go back and clear someone's driveway. That's the issue.
But I think you could put that in there in timelines saying within a 24-hour period unless unforeseen circumstances prevent. It still puts the ownership.
So the time frames we're looking at, for example, residential zone takes about 2 weeks for us to clear. So if we have a driveway at the beginning, do we go back and start clearing people's driveways and leave the other half of the town with no snow clearing at all whatsoever, you know, in order to keep going backwards? It becomes very difficult. Yeah, it's like a.
And Madam Chairman, members of council, I would encourage you to look at this in the strategy document that's meant to be. We don't want to create any liabilities for the organization with regards to having unachievable goals, as a general note. But definitely we can look at stronger wording, but I would probably still leave that relatively indistinct. There is clear law where municipalities have been found guilty where they said they would clear something within 48 hours. On the 49th hour, someone went through a sign and did not have the road cleared, so they were at fault for negligence. We are only found liable for negligence, and creating a policy that we don't achieve where there could be ramifications for safety is something I would suggest we avoid if we currently don't create that standard.
And I'd also like to point out our operations at the moment, our operational procedures at the moment is to plough to the middle of the road, so we wouldn't be leaving any windrows at people's driveways. We plough to the middle and pick up from the middle of the road. In the past, I believe practices were to push to the sides. We've moved away from that practice. But obviously that wouldn't be in the policy.
Councillor Bevan?
Through the chair. Having a family member that was bylaw and stuff in town for 25 years, this has been an ongoing thing. And I know quite a long time ago that they used to go around and try to clean out the driveways. And it got to be a lot of money for the town in that. And if you missed somebody, there was a lot of calls back here and that, why didn't you do mine? Then once you start doing that, then everybody wants it done. Now, I know the operators there, and I've watched them plowing that, and they drop the gates and try to keep it out as best they can and that, and some spills over and stuff like that too. And I think on certain occasions, if they made the rounds afterwards, there was something that's really excessive, they did come back and try to pull it out for them and that. But I know from experience there with the bylaw person that it was a big headache. I like the wording the way it is right now, because once they tried it, it just was a world of hurt for our bylaw people in our town of Edson, and it did cost a lot to have another guy go out with a bobcat or whatever, and it was a big, expensive item to do it. And once you started it, then the whole town wanted it, and it just didn't work out.
Councillor Zahara, sorry, Mayor Zahara.
Ooh.
That makes you feel young, sure.
Bad memory. I think we need to remember that we have significant snow events. Sometimes we have several smaller snow events that accumulate very quickly over a couple weeks. And because of the size of the community and equipment failures, we have to be, I think there needs to be common sense, and I think our staff have been very responsive when a mistake has been made. I think that if a call comes in and somebody has a 10-foot windrow, we're going to address that as quickly as we can. And it comes down to expectations of the public. Some people their expectations are unbelievable, and it's impossible to meet those expectations. I think we need to have common sense. We all have neighbors, and if somebody in our neighborhood has too much snow in their driveway, somebody in that neighborhood should be grabbing their snowblower and helping out. We all have responsibilities from the public and from our organization. I'm pretty happy to say that last year I think our crews did a remarkable job. The year before that we changed our processes, and there was a mistake made in particular in West Haven where the streets were left in quite bad shape, but crews went back and they addressed that. I think that we need to, and we need also as a council need to keep in mind, as soon as we want to increase the service level, there's costs associated with that, and we'll slow our crews down. The main priority is to getting our streets cleared, and everybody needs to pitch in to make that happen. That means public don't throw snow in the middle of the street. That means our crews. Let's not have a problem before it begins. Make sure those gates are down. Make sure we're not plowing those driveways in. And if you are in that neighborhood and you accidentally plow a driveway in, get that addressed right away as quickly as possible. But I don't want to hand tie our staff to unreasonable expectations, because with the weather events that we have, it's impossible to meet those expectations. And I think that I see here hiring of contracted services. I think the hiring of contracted services should be done for the downtown core all the time. They can work at nighttime in our downtown core, and then leave our staff to working in the residential neighborhoods during the day. I think that we're a little bit too slow to get to our downtown core, and I think we need to do a better job there. But overall, I think our crews have done a wonderful job in the last year, and I'm glad to see this policy move forward.
Councillor Beyer?
Through the chair, Mayor Zahara said a lot of my comments as well. I agree that I think that I don't want to be putting the town in any extra liability, and in the past several years, I think that because of the changes that have been made, I would anticipate that we're seeing less complaints about snow in people's driveways, just because of the way that the snow is being plowed away from the driveways. Now, I think the only complaint would be that now there's too much snow in the driveway and there's this lip they have to drop off, right? Which I've noticed, but that's not our problem. I did have a comment on number 3. There's, if you look on point number 3, the last sentence, this can be done using company standard communication techniques. I just wasn't very comfortable with the word company in there. Would that be better off putting the town standard communication technique? Sorry.
We can definitely change that language.
Yes, Councillor Swenson.
I will be bringing this item up again when it comes to council. Number 9 talks about a threshold of 5 centimeters for priority areas, and then a threshold of 10 centimeters for the remaining areas. It's not clear to me. So if it's not clear to me. So if the remaining areas have 11 centimeters and the priority area has 4 centimeters, then that means you go to the remaining areas? Or if priority area has 6 centimeters and the remaining areas have 11, like, it's not clear to me which has priority there, so I think that could be clarified. And then one more comment, if I may. Number 12 talks about staff may be required to work extended shifts and weekends. Can administration clarify that that all overtime must be approved through council? Like, they have to operate within their budget, or does this give them carte blanche to work overtime?
Yes.
Madam Chairman, I may ask for clarification, but to ensure you know, our collective agreement sets out the days and hours of work. Anything that's worked outside of that is considered to be overtime. It is an administrative function under the Municipal Government Act for determining when and how long staff work. So council can direct the CAO, and the CAO can make a direction, but we would not recommend that you as council start directing the hours of work that you would have for you might be found to be.
I don't
acting
believe you
outside of
meant
your
that,
authority.
just
No,
budgetary
I'm
restraints,
asking
and we
if-
do direct the budget.
Are you allowed to operate outside of budget?
No, I
no.
believe it states that in one of the points there, that we'll operate within the designed budget, and not be exceeding that.
Okay, that's all I was asking.
Right.
Madam Chairman,
Yeah.
then with that clarity.
Allocated funds.
We in fact would, like, we are required to act for the priority areas. That's a safety matter. So even given freedom, we would choose to have our crews work if there's snowfall that hits 10 centimeters on Friday and it happens to be overtime.
So yeah,
But ideally, we would try to stage everything and not undertake our winter snow clearing activities all through the weekend anymore. It's likely to be that we would not have as many residential snow clearings as we had previously seen, but it would definitely keep our fuel and our labor costs in a greater level of check.
so
Councillor Chenard?
sorry, just to clarify on some of that, yeah, so the allocated funds and the design of the budget, like the constraints that are in place with the funding, that also affects our contracted services as well. So we don't exceed our contracted service use either. We stay within that parameter as well. And then you're asking about the depth of snow and those thresholds. So we didn't change any of those levels of service. They came from the original policies to make sure that we didn't alter any level of service in that area. And so you plough the priority 1s and 2s at a certain depth, but we wouldn't necessarily go into residential zones until we reached the second threshold. Otherwise, we'd be never leave. It's really what.
And Madam Chairman, I want to draw one piece of information to your attention, which you might not have been aware of, is that we have now clarified what our level of service is under commercial routes. Previously, that had not been set into where it was in a priority. We addressed our primaries and we addressed residential, and we did not talk about the commercial areas that were outside of those leakages. So essentially, they're done before we initiate the larger residential clearing, because they actually service all residential areas from a commercial perspective. So they are getting we've clarified their level of service.
Okay, Councillor Chenard, you have the
Do it,
floor.
that's what change it.
Part of it I was gonna clarify, but you did, like, on what triggers 5 centimeters, et cetera. But when it comes to the budgetary, no one has a magic wand. We don't know how much snow, because we have some years, if we look at our snow pile, some years it's 3 times as big. So I believe that, whoever's in charge of it, we use common sense. Like, we're not bringing people in overtime to clear snow, but we have no control over how much snow. And year to year, some years we're under budget, and other years we go over. So to put a restriction on that, we have no control.
Well, there is an emergency
There
fund,
is,
though.
yeah.
So
Well-
if we do go over.
Well, I was looking at that, I was bearing it in about the emergency fund, but at the end of the day, like, some years you may get you know, we don't see it as often, but you may get 6 or 7 feet throughout an entire winter. In other years, we get in 1.5 feet. So I guess doing the priority roads, and we've had years that we've cleaned them up to 20 times because of snow, and some of the residentials don't get cleaned. So I would hate to see a restriction. We owe it to our public, and it's for fire protection, ambulance, et cetera, to clean the priority roads. I do appreciate the fact you guys, you know, factor in, and some of the staff, you know, they're getting tired, but on the same token is, and then I think at that time, if you're overstaffed, then that's when you bring in contractors, say, sorry, our staff has ran out of hours, but the way you've been doing it works, but there's no magic wand. We don't know how much snow is gonna happen.
Yeah.
So.
Councillor Bayer?
2 questions through the chair to Mr. Verhage. Do we have a current contract in place again with Alberta Transportation for clearing the turning lanes and parking areas along 2nd and 4th Ave again? Is that continued on?
Yeah, we have a contract to remove the snow banks. We don't clear the
Snow
snow on the highway.
Right.
We just remove the banks when they get to a certain depth, and they contact us and let us know when that depth has been reached, and then we'll go out and remove it.
Okay.
And they pay us.
You had 2 questions,
Okay.
you said?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Go ahead.
And then through the chair, considering Mayor Zaher's comment about the downtown core and getting that plowed out, do we contact the downtown core at all to let them know? And then because they also have sidewalks, it's my understanding that they do push the snow onto the road in that situation, if I'm not mistaken, before the plow trucks come through, so we can keep it accessible for walking. Is that not right?
Madam Chairman, I'll refer that to.
Yeah, so we will be communicating with them. In the past practices, there was no I guess procedure for performing any snow removal on not just the downtown core, but the residential zone, the commercial zone, i.e. 3rd Ave, where Walmart and Sobeys not. There was no practice to clear snow there, period.
Right. Okay.
So in the last year, we didn't clear snow there at all. We only did Main Street. We felt that most of the public are attending those areas on a regular basis, and we should be clearing snow there. So we introduced the commercial zone, and that includes 3rd Ave and around Walmarts and Sobeys and Independence, and we intend to do that before entering into the residential zone. Our practice there will be to push to the middle and pick it up. And coming back to the work in the weekends or in the evenings, it's easier for us to do some of those areas at 5 in the morning or on a Sunday evening when there's no cars parked in Main Street or around those areas. Hence why we, working outside of the regular work hours is a benefit to everybody for us to get that cleared before rush hour.
And Madam Chairman,
Yes.
just as a point of information generally, hearing some of the conversations, during winter snow clearing operations, it is almost every day that overtime is required, because we actually have a lot of mobilization and demobilization time that's associated with an activity. So working 10-hour days is hugely more efficient from a financial perspective than working no overtime, doing 7, and then not nearly getting half the work done. So.
And I'm sure you have that reflected in
Yeah.
your budget, so
Yeah,
we're
it
fine.
is definitely a tactic that we look at regularly, so.
So just one more change I'd like to bring, just make sure that you're aware of, is the sanding route. We added on a sanding route. In the past, crews were instructed to sand all of town, and that included cul-de-sacs and whatnot in residential areas. We found it left, it's like taking the reins off the horse when it comes to budget constraints on material usage. So we're going to concentrate on high traffic zones, again the commercial zones and the priority routes, with sanding on a regular basis, and then responding to call outs for specific junctions. So if someone calls up there's a really icy junction, we're going to go and attend to it, but we won't necessarily be passing that junction every single day. So that's the difference there. So we just want to make sure you guys.
For my input, I'd like to thank you very much for the snow removal, and many of our mayor's reflections are mine. I do believe downtown could be cleared out sooner. I felt last year it was sort of odd that you go downtown and it was one of the last places that was cleaned
Yeah.
out, and really people do go downtown and need to go downtown. I like the policy changes that you've made, and definitely as far as corners, I think you're going to know what corners need sanded. They're just continuously the same corners in town, aren't they?
Yeah.
So that would help. And I like the policy the way it's worded now, because if people continually push their snow out on the road, I'm not talking once or something, I'm
Yeah.
sure bylaw can go and give a warning or something, but if they're continually abusing it, it is a safety hazard, and they do need to be fined. And as far as going and cleaning up everyone's driveway, I do believe when the mayor said it's all of our responsibilities, we can want everything, and we can want our driveway clean. It still reflects right back to the only person who pays for it, and that's the taxpayer themselves. So what degree of service do we want? Like, of course, we want them cleaned out, and that's what you're trying to achieve here. And I think we need to work at trying to achieve that, but we can't promise that it will be achieved every single solitary snowstorm. So thank you for your policy. I appreciate it. Any other? Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I know we're going around in circles here a little bit. Just a question through to Sam. So with this new policy, how often do you anticipate we will be doing residential areas? I am a little concerned that we're not, with one of the comments that was made here, makes it sound like we may not be doing residential neighborhoods.
We will be moving it, we will be, what are we talking about, sanding, or are we talking about?
Snow removal.
Snow removal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so once we perform the 1s and 2s, we'll head into the commercial areas where the majority of people attend and on a regular basis. Then we'll be moving into the residential zones. So some of the aspects to consider are, again, due to budget constraints, we're not taking contractors into the residential zones. So it takes us a lot longer to get through sort of period of time. And if you're partially through and then it snows again, we've got to go back to the priority routes and start again. Our goal is to get it done as many times as we can with the process and the crews and the money that we have. So to say that we're only going to get it done twice, 2-3 times a year would be inaccurate to say so. It might only be that we only get it done once. We don't want to pin ourselves to a number. Last year we managed 3 times. I think that's going to be reduced with not using contractors because of the time it's going to take us to get there.
Okay, do we have any new
Madam-
information or new questions?
And Madam Chairman, I just would love to provide council one item of information to make sure you understand. Our snow clearing program is in the same budget as our summer programs. So if we spend more money without more resources in our winter program, we have less money for fixing regulatory signs, clearing, putting gravel on, buying materials for spray patching. So everything we do in the summer takes away from our capacity in the winter, but everything we do in the winter, which is usually an emergency situation, takes away from our ability to meet the service expectations during the rest of the year. So that's just to be clear, if we have a service increase indicated without additional resources, that will take away from a different season that we will
It
then
has
have
to.
a problem with. So.
Yes, Councillor Vyder.
Through the chair to Mr. Verhage, this is tying in because it's the snow, it's talking about the snow. Do we have some snow dump sites secured for this year?
Madam Chairman, through to
Feel
Councillor
free.
Byer, we have several sites that we've looked at. We have made applications to Alberta Environment. They have not yet indicated a timeframe that they would be able to get back to us. They did indicate that going to our previous snow dump until it has gone through the engineering process, which would not be possible at this time due to the saturation of the soil. They indicated that cost would be extravagantly larger to get it done for this year, and we can provide an update on that in the future. However, we do have several sites that we've worked out and we have discussed that we own, and we have discussed with the neighbors, so that do meet the minimum regulatory requirements for Alberta Environment. And our understanding is that the regulations allow us to place it on that site for 1 year without an approval, and any continued use would require approval.
So I'd just like to get this timeline straight. We've known about this since last year, right? And when did we apply for a new place? Yes.
Madam
Came
Chairman,
about in March.
yeah. Madam Chair,
Only
if you
March,
remember-
you knew?
Yeah. The week we did our last snow clearing was the week we got the letter stating that we have to remove the snow. And we provided a very simple explanation why that would not occur, because we now have an entire season of snow on the site. They indicated that we would not be allowed to use that site again until
Right,
we
so when
got
did
through
we
the
apply
engineering.
for a different one?
Yeah.
So there's
We
a
had
couple of-
not. Council approved an adjustment to its capital program so that we could get design done. We had to wait till the snow was nearly gone and then stripped the remainder so that we could get a geotechnical analysis to meet the requirements for engineering. Then when we got the engineering done based on the geotechnical, we put that out for tender, at which point then no contractor was willing to provide a guarantee on their price, except for one who bid anyways at 70% more than the anticipated construction cost, with no guarantee that he would not exceed that cost.
So what did you do?
All in all, we went from March, we worked mainly to contain last year's melt from March through to about June. We will be working on containing last year's melt to prevent an environmental fine. Then from June, we had a consultant work on design of rectification of the current site. They came up with a design and we put it out to tender in August. In August, the tender went out and closed in September with no bids. So in September, we then had to come up with alternative plans. And so in September, we put in into environmental for alternative sites. And that's where we're at right now.
But snow
So
was
it's been a-
falling, and
Oh yeah, it's been an issue, and to be honest, the biggest concern for us has been the environmental, the way they responded it from the environmental government to come in March and say that you can't have snow on that site in March was a real and threaten a fine at that point, you know, and stipulate that we spend a very large sum of money immediately on a site. You know, in March we hadn't budgeted to do any repair or construction of a snow dump. So we did push back a little bit and say that their expectations were unrealistic, and we're just really working as fast as we can with, at the same time, their time constraints. At the end of the day, we are now waiting for their approvals to mitigate any further environmental action.
but I believe last council, we were aware that there was problems with that already, weren't we? And we were already told there had to be like a base thing as a gathering thing for the salt and the debris.
Yep.
So we had, as a town, we had lots of warning on this, I think.
We did. Previous council had that warning, and we asked to have something done about it,
Mhm.
we did too, and it never was until now you guys got your marching orders.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Madam Chairman, we do have a strategy that we're working to implement and a plan to work through with the government. They, of course, work for the people as we do, and I'm sure they'll be reasonable in meeting our approach for this season, and then regathering into a permanent solution in the near future.
Okay. Councillor Chenard?
I have something, yeah. The comment about if we spend too much money is what I didn't like to hear. We spend too much money on snow, that will affect our summer. I have a problem with that because the summer program, most of the time that is a controlled environment. We need to look at, because if we have an extra snow year, then we have to apply. So at one time we had extra funding for emergency because an average snowfall would cost us 250, like a snow budget would be $250,000 to $300,000 a year, correct?
Madam Chairman,
Yeah.
at your strategic session, if council wants to, we
Yeah.
did not provide that publicly, but if you look at your package for the strategic session, we did price out our current and
No,
other options.
but that's where I'm hearing where the problem is. I fully appreciate that, but I don't believe that we should be actually punishing our summer program because it snowed too much. I appreciate we only have so much money, but we need to put money aside, because if we have too much snow, we didn't allow enough money. So I'm using an example, let's say if our summer project was to blade back alleys and gravel roads, so because we had too much snow, we are technically punishing ourselves and saying, sorry, we can't do back
That-
alleys, because
yeah.
most summer projects are predetermined, you know, of course, rain.
You
but-
ahead.
But we cannot control the amount of snow.
No, exactly. And so that's part of well, it's really starting when I came on here as transportation manager. The practices before, there were no breakdown on costs. It was an open door. So when your winter operations ran too long or went into too much contracted services or anything like that, it destroyed your summer program.
Right.
Because there were no breakdowns or parameters put on the winter costs. We're hoping
No
by
reserves for
yeah,
emergencies?
which led to the redevelopment of the policy and outlining the parameters and the development of a proper operations procedure to be able to put in defined parameters into our snow operations, to be able to better forecast the exact expense of sanding, for example.
Right.
Without a sanding route, how do you know how much you're going to cost per material, per kilometre, per snow event, that type of thing. So the development of the policy, the development of the SOP is exactly to address that concern that we had. It does still mean that if we do go above and beyond, it does start, we don't want to, and that's when that's how we're hopefully going to be able to determine if we should open up the emergency fund rather than eating into the summer program stuff. But that was all part of this.
Mayor Zahara.
And Madam Chairman, Council, a clear, much more detailed policy that we're asking to provide, to put in place, will allow us to do our metrics on what service we can provide at what cost, much more consistently, because it will be quantifiable and we can add or remove services on a map or on a time scale or by a centimeter. And so that allows us to be much more flexible in the sense that we can change our standard and we can change our costs at that point. And the difficulty with winter operations, of course, is it doesn't run on a yearly calendar, right? We have all the budget when we experience the majority of our snow, and then we're in the summer going, how much snow are we going to get in October, November, December? We're going to get none? We're going to get some? And then the question is, do we fill those potholes? Do we change those catch basins? And you kind of, at this point in the year, you can be in the position where by July you have no budget.
But you do have historical reference for budgeting for this, so it isn't guessing how much snow. We need to know how much we need for snow removal and emergencies. Anyway, on to you.
Yeah.
Mayor, and we need to try to wrap this up.
So and I think part of the issue is weather events are becoming more and more extreme. We know this, and we have not increased our snow removal budget for as long as I can remember. When I was on the council 10 years ago, it was $300,000 in the emergency fund, and I think we need to actually have a conversation about whether or not we are budgeting enough when it comes to snow removal. I think we need to look at our snow removal reserve. I don't think when was the last time we've actually accessed it?
This year.
Actually, this year was the only one. Just as a note, we don't budget snow separately. So we literally say this is what we do for roads, whether they're destroyed, they're wet, they need a culvert, or they're covered with snow. So the snow reserve is not accessible unless we have technically exhausted our entire budget for the year.
So we need to have a discussion about that, because I think that we are starting to fail on our transportation network. I think that when it comes to snow removal, that's the most tangible thing taxpayers see with their tax dollars. Same thing with potholes and that sort of thing. And I think
construction.
We should not, and I agree with Councillor Chenard, we should not be making our road infrastructure suffer because we're not budgeting enough. We need to have a bigger, broader conversation of, okay, we need to put more money into roads and maintenance so we don't have to rehab and spend millions of dollars. So we have those resources available. So that's one of my comments. And the other comment is, I've always been concerned about this, is that why is 10th Avenue not a priority route? 10th Avenue from the west end of town feeds everybody into Main Street, and feeds into the leisure center. And I know that there would be some costs associated with that, but I think we need to look at having 10th Avenue as, might be a third or a fourth priority, but having that as another east-west laneway for people from the western end of town. There's a lot of population there, a lot of traffic on 10th Avenue. But anyway, I don't want to get into a big conversation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Curry. New information.
I just want to say thank you for the amount of detail and doing that financial budgeting, being very specific. I think that really does help us to really analyze our budgets and having them separated. I think that does help to decide if we need to increase it. I would just like really clear data this year from adding those commercial routes and data from communication from the community. Because I do think that we do risk that we will be decreasing service because we have added these commercial routes. Hopefully, by decreasing sanding routes a little bit, then we'll see that equal out. But I do think that the fallout of that route is that there will be a decrease to residentials, which is, as we all know, snow removal gets the most public comments. So if we can just do a really good job with this being the very first year of kind of tracking that information, tracking the communication and such, just to see how that goes and to see if we need to look back and make any changes for next year, knowing it's the first season.
Sorry, I bet you thought this was a small item on the agenda, Councillor Sorensen.
I agree with the mayor. 10th Ave should be a priority, and just to be clear to administration, the maps are not included in the policy. They were just provided for today's discussion.
Yeah, that's correct.
Madam Chair, and through Councillor Sorensen, yes, technically the roads that will get plowed are a tactical matter, which is an administrative decision-making function. However, it's imperative that the policy understands how it's, to understand the policy, you have to see how we would implement it. And of course, the nice thing about placing it clearly in a map is it's easy to understand, and then placing it within the SOP allows us to adjust immediately. Because if it was strictly written into policy, we would be forced to follow it and have to come to council directly to add, remove, or adjust right away. Whereas this can now be at the direction of the CAO or our managers as they see a specific relevant issue.
Yes, and I do believe it is your right to give the routes that are given, but they certainly have to reflect the needs of the citizens of Edson.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
That's who they're for.
Yeah, this just it makes it a little bit easier by removing the maps, putting them, so you could actually come to us and say we think we want 10th Ave. We can add it to it without going
Right,
through
from
the
what
whole-
you hear from
That,
people.
you know, and that was a concern last year, is 10th Ave getting really rough up, but because it's in policy, you can't really do anything. So now you can say,
Now we can-
yeah, it's actually in really bad shape compared to other areas, we can go and address that.
Yeah.
Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to administration, I also agree with Mayor Zahara's comments about and Councillor Chenard's about having, you know, separate budgets for our road maintenance and our snow removal. I totally get that you guys, you know, look at it a certain way, but I don't think that if we have a high snow year that it means that catch basins and other road work don't happen in the summertime. I know a lot of people that have had some sidewalk repairs and basin repairs, you know, where they live, they're just absolutely impressed. They are so happy that some of these maintenance projects are happening, especially after years and years of pylons sitting in front of it, that they're getting addressed. So I think that, you know, lacking on that isn't going to help us, and we've seen our asset management plan, and I know we're having our budget seminar coming up here shortly, and I just wanted to reflect that I think that we need to you know, increase that budget if it hasn't been increased in 10 years or so, or whatever that looks like, to address that.
No further questions. Thank you. Really appreciate you coming. Thank you. All right.
Yeah.
At this time then, if anyone has a AUMA report they'd like to give, I know some of us felt we gave it at our last meeting. Councillor Bevan, you weren't at it, so you're fine. Councillor Curry, did you feel you gave it at our last meeting? Your AUMA report?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Chenard? Sorry.
Do you have something to add?
Go ahead. I might add.
Okay.
I know Councillor Byer wants to talk lots about one of ours, so I'll let
She
her
did
go
say
first.
she wanted to talk about
And
it.
then I'm
Yes,
gonna
so
let her go
you don't have
first.
one? You have one?
I just want to, I don't know if I mentioned, no, I was at the last council meeting, so I probably didn't mention.
No,
You
that's
did.
right, you were ill.
Thank you for filling in for me. So one of the seminar, two things I want to talk about. First thing is seminar with policing. You have the chief of police of the Edmonton Police Service, the RCMP, and the chief of police of the city of Tabor, which has their own municipal police force. And then remarkably, they're about the same size as us, which I go, maybe we could do something like that. But, talking about policing in today's day and age, and it was really remarkable because the chief of police of the city of Edmonton just talked about how they had 250 liquor store robberies in one weekend in the city of Edmonton.
Lot of liquor stores.
A lot of liquor stores. They caught one of the individuals who was responsible for about 50 of those. They arrest him. They go see the justice of the peace. 3 hours later, he's back on the streets. So you talk about the millions we spend on policing and the victims of crime within this province, and judges are just kicking these guys back out to the streets. We got a huge problem within the system. We have a huge problem with crystal meth in this province, and I was really impressed with his presentation because he said, you know, we spend all this time and money and effort on dealing with the opioid crisis. We spend money on marijuana and strategies and health, and then we have crystal meth and there's nothing. And this is causing widespread devastation right throughout this province. And so I think I'm very happy we've seen the Justice Minister and some of the stuff he's working on. So hopefully there'll be some more cohesive planning and dealing with some of that. They're going to be using, in particular, the City of Edmonton is using information and technology in order to come up with better policing plans and priorities. The issue is we're never going to arrest our way or jail our way out of the problems that we have in society today. We need to start dealing with the root issues, and that goes back to everything that we've been discussing at this council with mental health and addictions. The City of Taber, they reviewed, I think it was last year, they had 200 some calls for service, in which they determined that about 100 and I think it was about 170 of those calls ended up being dealt with without having to lay charges. 30 of those individuals needed some sort of mental health treatment, and only 2 of those individuals were actually charged when it came to criminal matters. So that's what's tying up policing resources. What they do in the city of, or the town of Taber, is they actually use the hospital as a de-escalation point, because in Taber there's not a lot of facilities open. They de-escalate the situation, they bring in a social worker, and they're fortunate that they're close to a city that has some mental health and addiction support where they can transport. But that's how they're addressing the issue. The Chief of Police of Edmonton and the RCMP were talking about how they're putting different strategies in place. So where they're shifting the focus on trying to do criminal prosecutions and arresting people to putting these people in the right path with the supports that they need, because that'll alleviate all the problems that we have in the system with courthouses and jails being filled with time and people that don't necessarily need to be there. Repeat offenders, once again, a huge problem. You know, we've seen the presentation from Staff Sergeant King where guys are doing, you know, get charged 90, 100 times and they're back on the streets within a couple weeks. In our community, I just learned that 3 of our most prolific offenders are in jail right now, and guess what? We don't see anywhere near the thefts occurring within town. As soon as they're released, you see the system failing us. So it was a really interesting presentation, and it was interesting to see that the cities are having the same problems as the rural areas, and everybody's kind of in the same pickles. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to do in Edmonton and some of the other places. The RCMP are actually doing a pilot project in one area of the province with social agencies, trying to work with the police in some of the smaller communities. And they're looking at hopefully rolling that out into other communities as well down the road. So it's a good presentation.
Councillor Sorensen, did you feel you reported, or you like to add?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan?
Thank you. So, and I know a few of you attended the Rebuilding Your Downtown session. I just thought I wanted to bring it back to the group. There were a few that weren't, as well as administration and the public. It was really eye-opening, and you know, some things that we've talked about before, but you know, it's hard to get your head around some of these things. So they talked about why the importance of a vibrant downtown core, that people need to have a sense of place, there needs to be gathering place, and it should be community building. As Councillor Curry mentioned previously, some physical retail is doing very, very well, even competing against, you know, places like Amazon. There are many, many successful businesses, and they did go in and elaborate on how they were successful. consumers want a great physical presence. They want the store to look and smell great and to not be cluttered and to have the sign to the washroom clearly displayed so people can see where they can use the facility if they need to use it while they're there. And the land use and zoning needs to be strategic. And I did go on and look at that, and I don't know what that means because I'm not in the planning department. But if there was a way that you could reiterate what that might look like back, or what other downtowns have or don't have, and you know, are we in the right spot or not with our zoning? I assume that we are based on what I looked at. No, we aren't. Okay. So I'd appreciate a report on that then in the future at some point. And something they said that, you know, it didn't matter what type of a downtown you had or where you were. They said all successful downtowns have residents living in them. So that's often like above the storefronts, and you know, that's not something that we have right now, to my knowledge. Maybe a couple, but not, you know, what I would say residents, you know, in plural sense. And so they said that the downtowns, you have to invest some money into them if you want them vibrant. And the city of Edmonton is investing $1 billion into their ICE district. Like, that's just phenomenal. But their expected payout of that is $3 billion. So, you know, they are seeing that investment as an investment, right, an asset and an asset in their community. So it was really interesting that way. And they said if you find something in your community that's catalytic, then you need to grab it and go with it. If you're going to wait for that to come to you, you're going to be waiting forever. So I guess it means we have to jump on opportunities as they come. And also affordable housing in there. And that municipalities need to be leading the way to get the public on board. So if there's something that we want to have, instead of just you know, maybe we can change zoning and that can help, but if there's something that we really want to encourage, then we might have to be the ones taking the reins on that, to showing the private sector that this is a desirable thing in our downtown. And that you need more foot traffic, which makes sense, but being very specific on the right kind of businesses that you're trying to attract, not just more retail, but really specific businesses that create additional foot traffic in your downtown core. And I believe Councillor Curry mentioned this a little bit as well, that the Shop Local campaign needs to be on the business and not the consumer. So right now we're saying shop local, it's good for business. They are the ones who buy the jerseys for your hockey teams, and not that I disagree with that, but it just doesn't work is what they're saying, that we need to make the businesses take that ownership upon themselves. And if we can identify an area in distress and encourage development in that area, all the taxes gained from that should be reinvested into that same area for 20 years. I thought that was pretty interesting, and I don't know if you guys have anything to support that type of information, but I'd be curious on learning a little bit more about that. So, and that you need to find organic ways for people to socialize in your downtown core. So that can, you know, we've all been to, like, I know when we were in Quebec City and we walked down that nice street with all the cool lights, and they had a park and a swing, and it was like, oh, that is so cool. And people playing music, like, that is, I think, an organic way. So, you know, there might be some opportunities to look at what we can do there. So that was what I saw with the business or downtown revitalization. I did also attend the trade show a lot, and the ATCO area, or the ATCO business there on their center there. They had a really interesting project that they've created. It's a combined heat and power energy efficiency that uses, so it's like a generator, I guess, to kind of wrap your head around it. It uses natural gas, and it creates electricity as a byproduct, which they use, and you can use it to heat your building. So any of the what did they say? Any of the excess thermal energy that is normally lost during power generation, that you can use that to provide heat as well. And it's got great reviews as far as reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and being very reliable. So they just retrofitted, I believe, Rocky Mountain House rec center for $1 million, and there was a grant out there, and Rocky Mountain House received a $750,000 grant of that. So it paid for 75% of the project. And then now it's lowering their whole base load off their whole rec center. So I thought that was pretty cool, and it's something that maybe we should definitely look at when it comes to the detailed design phase for our multiplex. And also ATCO had the EV chargers as well, so they talked a little bit about the southern region that they're doing right now, and what that looks like, and how we can get on board with that if we choose to do so. And another grant that Edson has been doing, we have in the past, I don't know if we have in the last couple of years, it's a Choose Well. And I believe all nonprofits and other areas besides the town can access this grant. It's only $2,000, but $2,000 every year to a nonprofit organization that's trying to build up some.
Only one per community.
So I asked the lady about that, and she said that Calgary
just-
has many.
I just did it. It's only one per community.
Okay.
It
so
says
the lady-
directly on the grant application.
Right, and I asked her about that there, and she's like, nope, you can get it more than one time. There's many
You
communities that
can
get it
get it
multiple.
year to year, but only one per community per year.
Per year, okay, interesting. So, but if the town isn't using it, that
Right,
I'm just
then
saying
some
that
other
somebody
year
should
can,
be
yeah, somebody
applying
should
for
be.
this every year, I think, because I know there's a lot of
Mhm.
really interesting projects that you can do on there. So that's what I have.
Thank you very much.
Can I add to hers now?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Sorry, and it's just
No, that's
because
okay, yeah.
the town
The
actually
business.
has applied for that one every year. There's been multiple different ones they've done. And so we were just looking at it,
Yeah.
and it directly says on the grant, only one per community.
It'd be nice to have a list of what grants we do apply for.
Yeah.
Then other,
Yeah.
like nonprofit groups
Yeah.
would know not to apply.
I just wanted to add with the downtown revitalization, just kind of two added points. Councilor Breyer touched on this, but one of the big things that they said was when providing the socialization for your downtown core, it is municipalities and the groups work together to get the businesses to come, not to have the businesses first. And that was kind of a big thing they said, is that it shouldn't be getting businesses that then draw people to downtown core, it should be the downtown core that draws the businesses. And I think that that was a really important factor, and that's where as the municipality we could have a huge thing in that. And then I thought just something interesting they said was, don't get bogged down with the process and start with little wins. So some of the little wins that they discussed were consistency. Some of the most successful downtown cores have the exact same hours of operation, and they don't alter those. And that if you don't have that consistency, that affects people moving away from that. And things like signage. So having the same signage and not being bogged down with extra signage in your stores, that's distracting. And lighting, having that same consistency between your stores. And I think we've seen that in some of the big places we've gone, like Quebec, where they have that in their main areas, where it's the very lighting that brings you in, and the storefronts look similar and such. And you see that, I guess, in Canmore and Jasper and such. But I thought it was interesting, just little wins that they said, let's start little.
Well, even putting the signs that everybody puts in their windows, just put them in your store, and
Not
then
in
people
your
have to
windows.
go in.
Yeah.
And of course, please remove the no public washroom sign.
Yeah.
To me, that's the most uninviting thing on a store.
Well, and like they said, the three things that are surviving are if you're surviving, it's because it's experiential shopping, specialty stores, and aesthetic value. We live in the world of Instagram, so people want to be able to walk into your store and take a picture that they can put on social media, which I thought was a really interesting, but that it is the job to draw the business, not for the business to draw the people.
Yes?
Yeah, so a question through to our development department. When we're talking about downtown revitalization, is there a way we can incentivize developers or business owners or property owners to redevelop their properties? So we have, for example, on our highway corridor, we have some buildings that are probably not in the best of shape. Is there a way that we can put into place some sort of incentive that they would do some infill and redevelop those properties? So say waiving of all development fees or tax-free for a year or something like that.
Madam Chairman, through your worship. There's actually several tools. Given some time, I would probably suggest a few different ones depending on what we want to achieve or how big we want to go into something. Currently, we do have a beautification grant that's based on a one-time static amount of money that we have. It is declining, but we've got $30,000 we're planning to budget into this next year. We expect that to either be fully utilized or almost fully utilized next year. That's a up to $5,000 matching grant for anything that's beautification that meets the requirements of the planning department, those objectives, and is also signed off by the community services general manager as consistent with any other approaches they have for nuisance bylaw and good looking properties and character within the area. So that's one way to doing it. Several municipalities have been successful in dealing with at least the basic level Main Street programs, where they say they will pay for They basically establish a certain type of image for signage or something simple, and basically bricks and mortar where, we'll pay for materials and then you hire labor, and everyone starts to get a more consistent look. It's kind of like when you look at a house that has 4 different types of flooring, it looks a little weird, and if you have 1 or 2, that's fine, right? It becomes more classic, right? It seems to have an image, and we can create that through incentivization. Other options are actually increasing the opportunities within downtowns. You look at more hospitality, you allow people to go out onto the sidewalks.
Yes.
That actually, tables and seats create revenue for those types of businesses. So you have increased their potential. And if you have a more attractive downtown, people will actually want to sit outside, right? And Edson is actually quite lacking in that particular service. If someone had a good patio, they would probably be relatively successful. So there's probably about 20 more tactics I could come up with, to the scale of looking at how Cochrane redeveloped its entire core area through a tax tool that is, my understanding, is very complicated. However, it effectively took all municipal tax, all provincial school tax, and reinvested it entirely within that area for several years. So even though it was being collected, it was being direct invested right back into that location, with a high degree of management required. But if you've ever been to Cochrane 10 years ago versus Cochrane now, you can tell that going from 9 to 12 to 13 to 20,000 people it was very drastic.
I just talked to a councillor, actually from Cochrane, talking about that exact project, how they worked it. It was very interesting.
Yeah. So.
Okay, anything else? Well, do we have any questions from the media or public regarding items from this committee?
I was waving at you.
Too bad, I'm sorry. I ignore them now. The meeting's long enough. Do you have any questions?
I actually have a question.
Good, please.
Just with regards to the keepers of the Athabasca, I don't know if you can tell me this, but with regards to the workshop coming to Edson, is that just the blanket exercise, or does that encompass all these, there's a list of 7?
What I understood, and I'm not sure if I'm right, so correct me, I thought the blanket exercise is going to be on the 7th.
Yeah,
And he couldn't do 2 in one day, he'd do 1, and I thought a different workshop possibly in the evening then? Did people understand it that way, or how did you understand it? Yes.
Madam Chairman, as a point of information, the Friendship Center's poster states that a free workshop will be held the 3rd Thursday of every month, starting in November.
Right.
It will happen at lunch between 1 and 4, or dinner 6 to 9.
Right, it doesn't state what, though. That's what
That's-
she was
that's not what
asking
he
about the
said.
blanket ceremony?
Not at all what he said.
Not at all,
No,
what he said.
no.
I think on the 7th, it's only the blanket
I,
ceremony.
okay,
Nothing
all right,
after
just
that.
the blanket
And then I
ceremony.
think there will be other workshops, but I don't think that they have come up with the dates. I think that these all workshops get hosted if you're a part of it, is what I understood.
Right, and
But
remember we
those-
sort of talking, are we part of it, aren't we part of it, or whatever, so I guess they're still in the process of getting it established. It will be at the Friendship Center by the sounds of it.
Do you have a copy of this?
No, I don't have
Is
that.
that
I'll give you my copy,
Okay.
and you can contact him directly. His
Yeah,
number's
oh yeah,
on
because there's a
there.
number there, that would be
Okay.
perfect, if you don't mind.
To hopefully clarify that.
Yeah, it'd be nice to publicize it.
Yeah,
Do you have
okay.
any other questions?
No, that was all for me.
Oh, please ask us about the snow removal route.
That's all for me.
You heard enough?
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I can do that.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. All in favor?
But I did